Welcome to the Heart's Haven. Let the story begin. A poor girl pulls a boy from a burning car, then his billionaire father appears. Rain hammered the streets of downtown Chicago like cold silver nails, turning the sidewalks slick beneath the glow of red traffic lights and flickering storefront signs. Most people hurried past with their heads down, coats pulled tight, desperate to escape the storm. No one noticed the small girl standing beneath the cracked awning beside the bus stop, clutching a paper bag filled with sandwiches she hadn't sold. Then came the sound, tires screaming, a violent crunch of metal, and suddenly, flames. A black SUV spun across the intersection and slammed into a utility pole hard enough to shake the ground beneath everyone's feet. Glass burst outward like ice shattering across a frozen lake. Smoke curled into the rainy night as fire bloomed beneath the hood, glowing orange against the storm. People gasped. Someone screamed, but no one moved. The heat pushed outward in angry waves while car alarms echoed through the street. A delivery driver pulled out his phone. Two tourists backed away in panic. A woman whispered, "Oh my God," as flames climbed higher along the side of the vehicle. Inside the SUV, a child was crying. The sound barely reached through the storm, thin and frightened, but the little girl near the bus stop heard it instantly. Lily Carter froze. She couldn't have been older than 11. Her hoodie was too thin for November weather, her sneakers soaked through from standing in rainwater all evening. Damp curls clung to her cheeks as she stared at the burning vehicle, breathing hard. The crying came again, not loud, just scared and alone. A man near the curb shouted, "Kid, stay back!" But Lily was already running. She dropped the paper bag onto the sidewalk and sprinted straight into the rain and smoke, while grown adults stood frozen behind her. The fire reflected in her wide blue eyes as she reached the SUV. One of the back windows had cracked open from the impact, jagged pieces of glass still clinging to the frame. Inside, a little boy struggled against his seatbelt, coughing as smoke filled the car. "Help," he whispered weakly. Lily grabbed the door handle. Locked. The flames surged hotter. People yelled for her to move away. She didn't. Her trembling fingers searched desperately along the broken window until she found the buckle release inside. Smoke poured into her face, making her cough, but she kept reaching. "Come on," she whispered. "Come on." Finally, click. The seatbelt released. The little boy collapsed forward into her arms, just as a burst of sparks exploded beneath the hood. Lily pulled him through the shattered window with every ounce of strength her small body had left. The boy clung weakly to her soaked hoodie while she dragged him across the rain-covered pavement, and seconds later, the SUV erupted behind them in a roar of fire and smoke. The crowd screamed. Lily shielded the boy with her body as heat rolled across the street like a wave from an open furnace. Her hands shook violently now, her sleeve singed near the wrist, but she never let go of him. The boy coughed hard against her shoulder, tears mixing with rain on his pale face. Then, barely conscious, he looked up at her and whispered one word, "Dad." And somewhere beyond the flashing police lights and growing crowd, a line of black luxury SUVs came racing through the storm. Sirens flooded the intersection within minutes, red and blue lights flashing against the rain-soaked streets while firefighters rushed toward the burning SUV. Steam hissed into the cold night air as water blasted across the flames. The crowd that had frozen moments earlier now surged with nervous voices, everyone talking at once, everyone suddenly wanting to help after the danger had already passed. But Lily Carter barely heard any of it. She sat trembling on the wet sidewalk beside the little boy she had pulled from the wreck. Her breathing came in shallow bursts as smoke lingered in the air around them. The sleeves of her faded gray hoodie were blackened near the cuffs, and rain dripped steadily from her tangled hair onto the pavement below. The boy clung weakly to her arm. Paramedics knelt beside them quickly, wrapping a blanket around his shoulders while checking his pulse. "You are safe now, buddy," one of them said gently. The child looked no older than 8. His blonde hair was damp with rain, his expensive wool coat streaked with ash and soot. Even through the chaos, it was obvious he came from a world completely different from Lily's. Still, his small hand would not let go of hers. "It is okay," Lily whispered softly, even though her own voice shook. "You are okay now." The boy blinked slowly, exhausted from smoke and fear. Then he looked past the ambulance lights toward the street. That was when the black SUVs arrived. 3 identical vehicles rolled through the police barricade, one after another, sleek and silent beneath the rain. Security men stepped out first, scanning the scene with sharp eyes and tense expressions. Then the final door opened. Damian Hayes stepped onto the street. The city knew his face instantly. Billionaire founder of Hayes Global Technologies, one of the most powerful men in Chicago. Newspapers called him brilliant. Business channels called him ruthless. Employees called him impossible to read. Tonight he looked like a man whose world had stopped breathing. Rain soaked the shoulders of his dark overcoat as he searched the crowd desperately. The controlled mask he wore in every magazine interview was gone now, replaced by something raw and terrified. "Ethan!" he shouted. The little boy's eyes widened immediately. "Dad!" Damien crossed the street so fast that even his security team struggled to keep up. The moment he reached his son, he dropped to his knees on the soaked pavement without caring about the rain, the cameras, or the watching crowd. He pulled Ethan tightly against his chest. For a second, neither of them spoke. Ethan buried his face into his father's coat and began crying quietly, the kind of frightened crying children do only after they finally feel safe. Damien closed his eyes. His hands shook, and then his gaze lifted toward Lily. She still sat there in the rain, small and silent beneath flickering ambulance lights, clutching the blanket around her thin shoulders. Her burned sleeve peeked through the fabric, but she tried to hide it instinctively. One of the paramedics leaned toward Damien carefully. "She got him out before the fire spread," the medic explained. "Honestly, sir, if she had waited even 30 more seconds..." The sentence never finished. It did not need to. Damien stared at the girl as if he could not fully process what he was hearing. An 11-year-old child, a poor kid standing alone at a bus stop. She had run into flames while grown adults stood frozen. Lily lowered her eyes uncomfortably as the billionaire looked at her. Then very quietly, she asked the only thing she seemed to care about. "Is he going to be okay?" Damien could not answer right away, because suddenly, standing in the middle of rain, smoke, and shattered glass, the most powerful man in the city realized a little girl with almost nothing had just saved the person he loved most in the world. The rain finally began to soften by the time the ambulances pulled away from the intersection. Chicago's streets still glowed wet beneath the city lights, reflecting streaks of red, blue, and gold across the pavement like melted paint. Smoke drifted upward into the cold November air, while reporters gathered farther down the block, whispering about the accident already spreading across social media. But inside the emergency room at St. Matthew's Medical Center, everything felt strangely quiet. Lily sat alone near the corner of the waiting area, her feet dangling slightly above the tiled floor. Someone had given her dry socks and a paper cup filled with lukewarm, hot chocolate, though she had barely touched it. The oversized hospital sweatshirt hanging from her shoulders swallowed her tiny frame completely. Across the room, doctors and nurses moved carefully around Ethan Hayes' hospital bed. The boy was stable now, exhausted but safe. Every few minutes, Damien glanced through the glass doors toward his son, as if reassuring himself Ethan was truly still there. He had not left the hallway once, not even to answer the dozens of calls flooding his phone. One of his assistants approached quietly with a tablet in hand. "Sir, the board members are asking for an update. The press is already outside." Damien did not even look up. "Tell them my son is alive," he said flatly. "That is the only update they need." The assistant nodded quickly and stepped away. For several long seconds, Damien remained still beside the window overlooking Ethan's room. The polished billionaire the world knew seemed to disappear beneath the harsh, fluorescent lights of the hospital. Without the cameras in conference rooms, he suddenly looked less like a titan of industry and more like a tired father trying to hold himself together. Then his eyes shifted again, toward Lily. She sat curled into herself, quietly staring at the steam rising from her untouched cup. Her hands were pink from heat and cold mixed together, and beneath the loose sweatshirt sleeve, the edge of her burned wrist remained visible. Damien noticed the nurse gently applying ointment earlier. The girl had barely reacted. That bothered him more than he expected. He crossed the waiting room slowly and stopped near her chair. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Lily looked up first. "Mr. Hayes?" she asked softly. His expression tightened slightly. Most adults used his title carefully, nervously, yet somehow hearing it from a child made him feel older than usual. "You know who I am?" he asked. She nodded once. "My grandma watches you on the business channel sometimes." A faint smile almost touched his face before disappearing again. "How is your arm?" he asked quietly. Lily shrugged. "It is okay." But the answer came too quickly. Damien crouched slightly so he could look her in the eye. "You do not have to pretend you are fine." That surprised her. Children like Lily learned early that pretending was easier. Pretending the cold did not hurt. Pretending hunger was normal. Pretending fear eventually went away. She lowered her eyes toward the cup in her hands. "My grandma gets worried if I come home hurt," she admitted softly. Something inside Damien shifted at those words. Not because they were dramatic, because they were simple, real. He glanced toward the plastic grocery bag resting beside her chair. Inside were the soggy sandwiches she had been trying to sell before the crash. The handwritten cardboard sign taped to the side read, $5 each, homemade. The ink had bled from the rain. "You were out there working this late?" he asked. Lily gave a small nod. "Rent is due next week." The sentence landed harder than he expected. For years, Damien Hayes had negotiated billion-dollar deals without blinking. Numbers never touched him emotionally. They were simply tools. But hearing an 11-year-old child say rent is due next week while sitting in a hospital after saving his son somehow cracked through every layer of armor he had built around himself. Then Ethan's voice suddenly echoed weakly from down the hallway. "Dad?" Damien turned instantly, and to his surprise, the boy was not looking for him. Ethan was looking for Lily. Damien turned so quickly his chair nearly scraped against the hospital floor. Through the glass doorway, Ethan was sitting upright now beneath the pale blue hospital blanket, his small face tired but alert. The boy's blonde hair still clung damply to his forehead, and the heart monitor beside him beeped softly in the quiet room. But his eyes were fixed on Lily. "Can she come in?" Ethan asked weakly. The nurse glanced at Damien, waiting for permission. For reasons he could not explain, Damien hesitated only a second before nodding. Lily looked startled as the nurse guided her toward the room. She moved carefully, almost nervously, like she was afraid her wet sneakers did not belong on polished hospital floors. The oversized sweatshirt sleeves covered most of her hands, and her damp curls framed a face still pale from exhaustion. The moment she stepped beside the bed, Ethan relaxed visibly. "You stayed," he whispered. "Of course I stayed," Lily answered softly. The boy swallowed hard, emotion still too close to the surface after the crash. Everybody else ran away. Her expression changed at that, not dramatically, just a tiny sadness passing through her eyes like a shadow. "My mom used to say scared people do not always mean to leave," she murmured. The sentence hung quietly in the room. Damien felt it settle somewhere deep in his chest. Ethan slowly reached toward her burned wrist. "Does it hurt?" "A little," Lily admitted. The boy looked guilty instantly. "I am sorry." "You do not have to say sorry for getting scared," she told him gently. Again, Damien found himself staring at this child in disbelief. Lily spoke with a calmness that did not belong to someone her age. There was no self-pity in her voice, no expectation of reward, just warmth, real warmth, something he had not felt much inside his own home since his wife passed away 3 years earlier. The silence was interrupted by another knock at the hospital door. One of Damien's security advisors stepped inside quietly, holding a folder. "Sir, investigators need your statement about the accident." Damien nodded once, but did not move immediately. The advisor lowered his voice carefully. "There is also the matter of the vehicle inspection. Early reports suggest possible brake failure." Damien's eyes sharpened instantly. "What kind of brake failure?" "They are not sure yet." The room suddenly felt colder. Damien glanced toward Ethan lying in the hospital bed, then toward the rain still sliding down the dark windows outside. His instincts, the same instincts that built a billion-dollar empire, began turning quietly beneath the surface. Something about tonight no longer felt random. But before he could think further, Ethan's small voice interrupted again. "Dad?" Damien stepped closer immediately. "Can Lily stay until I fall asleep?" The request caught him off guard. Ethan had barely spoken to anyone since his mother died. Teachers described him as withdrawn. Therapists called him emotionally distant. Even at home, silence had become the normal language between father and son. Yet tonight, after only 1 hour, this little girl had reached him in ways Damien had not managed in years. Damien looked at Lily again. Her eyelids drooped from exhaustion, but she still nodded gently toward Ethan. "I can stay a little." The boy smiled faintly for the first time that night, and somehow that tiny smile hit Damien harder than the accident itself. Hours later, near midnight, the hospital hallway had finally quieted. Most of the reporters were gone. Nurses moved softly beneath dimmed lights, while snow began mixing with rain outside the windows. Lily sat beside Ethan's bed reading from an old children's book the hospital volunteer had brought upstairs. Her voice was soft and uneven from fatigue, but Ethan listened carefully to every word. Damien stood unnoticed near the doorway, watching. For the first time in longer than he could remember, the emptiness inside him did not feel quite so absolute. Then his phone vibrated again. A message from his head of security appeared across the screen. The SUV's brake lines were cut intentionally. Damien's blood ran cold. And inside the quiet hospital room, Lily turned the page of the storybook, completely unaware that the danger surrounding Ethan Hayes was far from over. Snow began falling just before 1 in the morning, soft, white flakes drifting past the hospital windows, while the city slowly disappeared beneath the quiet storm. Most of the lights inside St. Matthew's had dimmed by then. Nurses whispered at their stations. Hallway televisions played muted late-night news no one was watching. But Damien Hayes remained awake. He stood alone near the far end of the corridor, staring at the security report glowing on his phone screen. The words repeated in his mind over and over. Brake lines intentionally damaged. Not an accident, not bad weather. Someone had wanted that SUV to crash. A cold heaviness settled into his chest as he rubbed a hand across his jaw. His son had almost died tonight, and if Lily had not been standing on that corner at exactly the right moment, he could not finish the thought. Behind him, Ethan finally slept peacefully beneath the hospital blankets, still clutching the edge of Lily's sweatshirt sleeve in his small hand. The little girl had fallen asleep too, curled awkwardly in the chair beside him, with the storybook resting open in her lap. Damien watched them through the glass for a long moment. Two children from completely different worlds, one born into wealth most people could never imagine, the other counting sandwich money to help pay rent. Yet somehow Lily had become the only thing making Ethan feel safe tonight. His head of security approached quietly down the hallway. "Sir," the man said carefully, "there is more." Damien's eyes hardened instantly. "What?" The driver who usually picks Ethan up was switched at the last minute this evening. A pause. And security footage from the parking garage is missing approximately 12 minutes. The billionaire's stomach tightened. Years of running a global company had sharpened his instincts dangerously well. Missing footage, switched schedules, damaged brakes. This was planned. Who had access to the vehicle? Damien asked coldly. We are still narrowing the list. No leaks, Damien said firmly. No police statements yet, and double security around Ethan immediately. Yes, sir. The guard stepped away. Damien remained still beside the darkened window overlooking the snowy streets below. For years, he had survived in a world where power attracted enemies. Lawsuits, threats, betrayal. None of that surprised him anymore. But this was different. This involved his child. And now, whether she realized it or not, Lily might also be connected to whoever caused the crash. Back inside the room, Ethan stirred slightly in his sleep. His fingers tightened instinctively around Lily's sleeve. The movement woke her gently. For a second, she looked confused by the bright hospital lights in an unfamiliar room. Then she noticed Damien standing near the doorway. I am sorry, she whispered quickly, sitting upright. I did not mean to fall asleep. You do not have to apologize, Damien answered quietly. Lily carefully loosened Ethan's hand from her sleeve without waking him fully. The motion revealed the small, silver necklace around her neck for the first time, hidden beneath the oversized sweatshirt collar. Damien froze. The tiny silver charm attached to the chain caught the hallway light perfectly. A crescent moon. His expression changed instantly, because years ago, before fame, before billion-dollar buildings and headlines, he had once given an identical necklace to someone he loved. Someone he had not seen in over 12 years. Lily noticed him staring. My mom gave it to me, she said softly. She said it belonged to someone important once. Damien could not speak. Outside, snow continued falling across Chicago, while somewhere deep inside the billionaire's carefully controlled world, another crack quietly began to form. For several seconds, the hospital room felt completely still. Damien Hayes stared at the crescent moon necklace as memories he had buried years ago suddenly rushed back with painful clarity. A small coffee shop near Lake Michigan, snow falling outside fogged windows. A young woman laughing softly as she tucked the silver chain beneath her sweater and told him she would never take it off. Claire Carter. The name hit him like a distant echo. He had not spoken it out loud in over a decade. Lily shifted uncomfortably beneath his stare, instinctively touching the necklace with her fingertips. My mom said it was special, she explained quietly. She wore it every day before she got sick. Damien forced himself to breathe evenly. How long ago did your mother pass away? He asked carefully. Lily lowered her eyes. 3 years ago. Something tightened deep in his chest. The timeline fit too perfectly. Outside the room, snow continued drifting across the sleeping city, while Ethan rested quietly between them, unaware that the air around him had suddenly changed. Damien pulled a chair closer, slowly, and sat down for the first time all night. Not as a billionaire, not as a CEO surrounded by assistants and lawyers, just as a man trying to understand the impossible. What was your mother like? He asked softly. A tiny smile appeared on Lily's tired face. She was kind, she whispered, even when things got hard. The answer came instantly, without hesitation. Damien remembered that about Claire too. No matter how broke they had once been, no matter how uncertain the future felt back then, she always carried warmth into a room like sunlight breaking through winter clouds. Lily looked toward Ethan, sleeping peacefully. She used to tell me that scared people need gentleness more than anything. Again, Damien felt that strange ache inside him, because Claire used to say those exact words. His eyes drifted back to the necklace. Your last name is Carter? He asked carefully. Lily nodded. Lily Carter. The sound of it nearly unraveled him. For years, Damien Hayes had trained himself never to show emotion publicly. Investors trusted control. Employees feared weakness. The entire world around him had been built on discipline, precision, and distance. But tonight, sitting beside two sleeping children in a quiet hospital room, he felt his carefully constructed walls beginning to crack apart. A soft knock interrupted the moment. One of the nurses stepped inside, carrying a fresh blanket in a small paper bag. "The cafeteria is closing," she explained gently. "I thought the little girl might still be hungry." Lily immediately shook her head politely. "I am okay," but her stomach betrayed her with a quiet growl. The nurse smiled knowingly before placing the bag beside her anyway. After she left, Lily hesitated before opening it carefully. Inside sat a turkey sandwich, a small bag of chips, and a warm chocolate chip cookie wrapped in paper. Her eyes widened slightly at the cookie. Damien noticed. "Go ahead," he said quietly. Lily looked almost embarrassed by how hungry she suddenly seemed. She broke the cookie perfectly in half before taking a bite. Then, without thinking, she placed the other half gently beside Ethan's bed for when he woke up later. The gesture was so small, so natural, and somehow it shattered something inside Damien completely. Because people who grow up with very little usually protect every scrap they have. But Lily still shared instinctively, even after everything life had already taken from her. Damien looked down for a moment, gathering himself silently. Then he made a decision. "You and your grandmother are not going home alone tomorrow," he said softly. Lily blinked in surprise. And for the first time that night, Damien Hayes realized he no longer felt like he was helping a stranger. Morning arrived quietly over Chicago. Fresh snow covered the sidewalks outside St. Matthew's Medical Center, softening the noise of the city beneath a blanket of white. The storm from the night before had passed, leaving the skyline washed pale silver beneath the winter sun. Inside the hospital room, Ethan woke slowly to the smell of pancakes. For a moment, he looked confused. Then he saw Lily sitting cross-legged near the window beside a small tray of cafeteria breakfast food. The paper cup of syrup sat untouched while she carefully peeled apart strips of bacon and arranged them evenly on napkins like she was trying to make the meal last longer. "You stayed," Ethan said sleepily. Lily smiled. "I said I would." The boy relaxed instantly. Damien stood near the doorway watching the exchange in silence. He had spent most of the night handling security calls and speaking privately with investigators. Yet somehow, despite the exhaustion pulling at his shoulders, this room felt calmer than his penthouse had in years. Ethan looked toward his father hopefully. "Can she eat with us?" The question was simple, but Damien noticed something painful hidden underneath it. Not "can she stay?" Not "is she allowed?" "Can she eat with us?" Like togetherness itself still felt uncertain to him. "Of course," Damien answered quietly. Lily hesitated. "I do not want to be trouble." "You are not trouble," Ethan said immediately. The speed of the response made Damien glance at his son in surprise. For months after his mother's death, Ethan had barely spoken more than a few words at a time. Therapists had tried everything: expensive schools, child specialists, private retreats. None of it had reached him. Yet this little girl with burned sleeves and worn-out sneakers somehow had. As they ate breakfast together, the room slowly filled with tiny sounds Damien had forgotten he missed. Ethan laughing quietly when syrup dripped onto his blanket. Lily apologizing every few minutes for taking too much food, even when she barely touched anything herself. It felt ordinary, and somehow that made it extraordinary. Then Damien's phone buzzed sharply against the windowsill. His expression darkened instantly as he read the message. "Security breach at Hayes residence. Attempted entry overnight. No injuries." The warmth inside the room vanished immediately. Damien stepped into the hallway to answer the incoming call, lowering his voice. "Tell me exactly what happened." "We intercepted someone near the east security gate around 2:30 this morning," his head of security explained. "They fled before police arrived." "Was Ethan the target?" "We cannot confirm yet, sir." Damien closed his eyes briefly. This was escalating faster than he expected. When he returned to the room, Lily was quietly helping Ethan fold paper napkins into little boats. The sight nearly stopped him cold. Ethan looked happier sitting there with paper napkins than he had opening expensive birthday gifts last year. Then Lily glanced toward Damien and noticed the tension in his face immediately. "Something is wrong," she said softly. Damien considered lying. Adults often lied to protect children. But something about Lily made dishonesty feel impossible. "There may still be danger connected to the crash," he admitted carefully. Ethan's smile disappeared. Lily instinctively reached for his hand beneath the blanket. "We will keep him safe," she whispered gently. "Not I. We." The word lingered heavily in Damien's chest, because for the first time since his wife died, he no longer felt like he was standing alone between his child and the world. And neither, somehow, did Ethan. By late afternoon, the snow outside had turned the city almost peaceful. Chicago's streets shimmered beneath pale winter sunlight, while steam curled from subway grates and coffee carts along the sidewalks. Inside St. Matthew's, doctors finally cleared Ethan to leave the hospital the following morning. It should have felt like relief. Instead, Damien Hayes felt the pressure tightening around him with every passing hour. The investigation into the crash was moving quickly now. Too quickly. One of his senior executives, Victor Langford, had quietly disappeared from a board meeting that morning after learning investigators were reviewing company security records. Surveillance files had been erased. Financial transfers had surfaced overnight. The pieces were beginning to connect into something ugly, and Damien understood exactly what that meant. Someone close to him had betrayed him. Inside Ethan's room, however, the world still felt strangely warm. Lily sat near the foot of the bed, helping Ethan build a crooked little city out of paper cups, napkins, and empty pudding containers from lunch trays. The boy laughed quietly every time one of the towers collapsed sideways onto the blanket. Damien stood near the doorway watching them. The sound of Ethan laughing no longer startled him now, but it still healed something inside him every single time. Lily looked up suddenly. "Did you ever build pillow forts when you were little?" Damien blinked once, caught completely off guard by the question. "No," he admitted after a pause. "I do not think I had time." Ethan frowned slightly. "That is sad." The answer was so honest that Damien almost smiled. Almost. Then Lily tilted her head thoughtfully. "Maybe grown-ups forget how to feel safe too." The sentence landed harder than either child realized, because Damien had spent years building security systems, private gates, armored vehicles, and guarded penthouses. Yet none of it had protected the people he loved most. Not his wife, not Ethan. And now somehow safety looked less like steel and money and more like an exhausted little girl sitting cross-legged on a hospital bed, making paper towers with his son. A soft knock interrupted the moment. Damien's head of security stepped inside quietly. His expression alone was enough to drain the warmth from the room. "We confirmed it," he said carefully. "Victor Langford ordered the vehicle tampering." Lily instinctively looked toward Ethan. The boy's face paled slightly. Damien kept his voice calm, despite the anger tightening beneath it. "Where is he now?" "He attempted to leave the country this morning. Federal agents intercepted him at the airport." Silence settled across the room. Outside the window, snow drifted slowly past the glass, while hospital lights flickered on across the city skyline. Ethan lowered his eyes toward the blanket. "Was he trying to hurt me?" Damien crossed the room immediately and knelt beside his son's bed. "No one is going to hurt you," he said firmly. Then, without thinking, Ethan reached for Lily's hand again. And Damien realized something important in that quiet moment. The person Ethan trusted most after surviving the worst night of his life was not a bodyguard, not a billionaire father, not a security system. It was the little girl who ran into the fire when everyone else stood still. 2 weeks later, the first real snowfall of December covered Chicago in white. The city moved slower beneath the winter sky. Storefront windows glowed gold against the cold. Christmas lights blinked softly along quiet streets, while children pressed mittened hands against bakery glass downtown. And for the first time in years, the Hayes penthouse no longer felt empty. The fireplace crackled warmly across the living room, while Ethan sat cross-legged on the floor, building a cardboard rocket ship out of delivery boxes with Lily. Pieces of silver tape stuck to his sleeves, and every few seconds he laughed when the crooked wings collapsed sideways. The sound echoed through the apartment like something long forgotten. Life. Damien stood near the kitchen island, watching them quietly with a coffee mug warming his hands. For years, silence had ruled this home after his wife passed away. Every room had become polished, spotless, untouchable. Now there were crayons on the table, tiny shoes near the hallway, a half-finished puzzle beside the couch, and somehow the mess made the place feel human again. Lily's grandmother, Eleanor Carter, sat bundled beneath a blanket near the fire, healthier now after receiving proper medical care. Color had finally returned to her cheeks. Every so often she watched Lily with tearful eyes, still unable to fully believe how much their lives had changed after one terrifying night in the rain. Damien walked toward the large window overlooking the snowy skyline. News reports about Victor Langford had spread across every business network in America. Arrests, fraud investigations, corporate conspiracy charges. The board had already voted him out permanently. Justice had arrived. But strangely, that no longer felt like the most important thing. Behind him, Ethan suddenly ran across the room, holding the crooked cardboard rocket proudly above his head. "Dad, look! Lily says it can fly all the way to the moon." Damien smiled fully this time, a real smile, the kind he had not felt in years. "Well," he said softly, kneeling beside them, "then I think every rocket needs a crew." Ethan grinned immediately. "Me and Lily?" Damien looked at the little girl carefully, at the silver crescent moon necklace resting gently against her sweater, at the child who had run into fire for someone she did not even know, at the quiet bravery that had somehow stitched warmth back into all their lives. "Yes," he answered quietly, "you and Lily." For a moment, none of them spoke. Snow drifted peacefully beyond the glass, while the firelight danced softly across the room. No reporters, no boardrooms, no flashing cameras, just three people sitting together in warmth they had all been missing in different ways. Then Lily looked up at Damien carefully. "Do you think my mom would be happy now?" His throat tightened instantly. He glanced toward the necklace once more before answering. "I think," he said softly, "she would be proud that you never stopped being kind, even after life gave you every reason to stop." Lily's eyes shimmered quietly, and as Ethan leaned sleepily against both of them beside the glowing fireplace, Damien finally understood something money had never been able to teach him. Sometimes the people who save us do not arrive wearing suits or carrying power. Sometimes they arrive soaked from the rain, carrying nothing except courage and a heart big enough to run into the fire for someone else.